Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. With your permission, I would like to learn a little bit of the Zera Shimshon in this week's Parashat. Parashat Chukat. We're going to learn Drush Daled in the Zera Shimshon. Says the Zera Shimshon, he brings the pasuk from the Parashat, very famous pasuk that was expounded in many different ways by the Chachamim. He's going to look at one angle here. It says, Zot HaTorah Adam ki yamut be'ohel. This is the law regarding a man who dies in the tent. Right? That's the introductory verse to many laws that the Torah follows over there regarding a person who dies inside of an enclosed area under a roof. Right? A dead body is the highest level of tum'ah, impurity, and that impurity transfers and spreads via the roof. Any open vessel that was in the room, that was under the same roof, any other person that was under the same roof with the dead body, he receives this tum'ah, this impurity, very high level of impurity. And there's very many intricate and detailed laws about it, about the roof itself and about the transfer of tum'ah and what becomes tameh, how. Very complicated stuff, but basically that's how the Torah introduces that parasha in the Torah, which appears at the beginning of Parashat Chukat. Makshim, the Chachamim asked the question, Lama istarich lemichtav zot haTorah de Adam ki yamut be'ohel lechodeh sagi. Why did the Torah have to say these two extra words in this introductory verse? The words zot haTorah, this is the law regarding a person who dies in a tent. It could have just said, if a person dies in a tent, XYZ, this law applies, that law applies, Tumah gets transferred, the Ohel, XYZ, whatever. It didn't have to start with the words, this is the law, right? There's a lot of laws in the Torah. A lot, 613 to be exact. And all those mitzvot. And the Torah does not always, very rarely actually, does it introduce the law by saying the words, Zot HaTorah, this is the law for XYZ, right? Torah also means law, by the way, right? So, why? It's only in a few places, in a handful of places that the Torah introduces the law by saying Zot HaTorah, Zot HaTorah. This is the law regarding X. This is the law regarding Y. And this is one of those places. The law of a dead body is one of the places where it starts with Zot HaTorah. The Chachamim want to know why. Says Zera Shimshon, Uldidan Yuvan Shapir. We can understand this well. B'mayda minam b'mesechet ketubot perek yudbet. Regarding the story of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, of course, is one of the most important monumental figures ever. He was a Nasi, he was of the presidential lineage from Hillel HaZaken, and he was the person who redacted the Mishnah. He was the first person to officialize a written version of the oral Torah. Right? Before then, it was just written Torah, the scrolls that we have, the Bible, the Tanakh. And although oral Torah, the laws, were only spoken verbally, taught in yeshivot from rabbi to student, rabbi to student, rabbi to student, generation to generation. It was meant to be that way, and there's a law in the Torah that says it must be that way. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi came along and changed that. He came along and he had to, because to save the nation, he had to do that. If he didn't do that, Torah and Judaism at all would not have survived to this point, because people were already starting to forget, and the mental capacity of the people was not on the same level to be able to remember everything just by mouth, by memory and word of mouth. That's why he came down and actually wrote down and ordered and organized, collected and sifted through the Mishnah. Right, the 6 orders of the Mishnah that we have today is from Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and from there opened up every single halakha you ever heard of in your life. It's all from there. Right, from there came the Gemara, and from the Gemara came Rishonim, from Rishonim came Acharonim, Achrei Acharonim, Shulchan Aruch, etc., etc. And all the other poskim you ever heard of, they all branched out after Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. So he was the first official posek for the whole generation, right? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, when he wrote the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara Masechet Ketubot towards the end talks about what happened when he died. About 2 pages, a page and a half, it speaks about over there. All different things were related to his death. And when he died, says the Gemara over there, Masechet Ketubot, Batla Kedusha. Holiness was nullified from the world. There was no such thing as holiness anymore. Whatever that means. Now the Chachamim debate, what does that mean? No such thing as holiness. What does that mean? כתבו תוספות on the spot over there. דיבור מתחיל אותו היום, that's the source. On that page in the Gemara, כתובות 103b. I hope you're not hearing the sounds right now. Right now it's a lot of fireworks are outside. I hope it's not interrupting the audio. But we continue anyway. It says in the Gemara over there, Tosafot over there, 103b, Ketubot. They explain, what does it mean that holiness was gone from the world? When Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died. It says, Devatla Kedusha Ratzon Omar Kedushat Kehuna. Delgamre HaKohen Haya Mutar Lo Leitama. He says the holiness that the Gemara is talking about there is referring to the holiness of the priesthood, holiness of Kohanim. Meaning in general, Kohanim are not allowed to make themselves tameh to a dead body, to expose themselves to the tum'ah of a dead body, unless it's one of their close 7 relatives. Right? They have to maintain a certain level of kedusha, of holiness. That's why they're not allowed to do that by the Torah. But what it means here that kedusha was nullified, it means that law was temporarily suspended for Kohanim. And even Kohanim were able to come to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's funeral to indulge in his, involve themselves in his burial, which is a great honor to bury a Talmid Chacham like that. So that's what the Tosafot say. In the name of Rabbeinu Hananel Kohen, that's one of the Chachamim in the Tosafot. That was his opinion. Rabbeinu Hananel Kohen said it means that Kohanim were allowed to, even though usually they're not, but in this case they were allowed to come and bury the body of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and expose themselves to that tum'ah of his dead body. But Tosafot doesn't like this answer, and they challenge it. They say that that maybe the only thing that was suspended when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died was a different type of tum'ah, a lower level, an easier level of tum'ah that was suspended and allowed. That type of tum'ah, which is only the Rabbanan, is called beta pras, which literally means a field that was plowed. Which means at the time, if there was a field and there could have been a grave site in that field, meaning somebody buried somebody in that field, and then that whole field was plowed, which means that the pieces of the bones, the remaining bones of that dead body that may have been buried there, were now spread out through the whole field, and you don't know where that bone could be, and even a small bone, the amount of a se'orah, which means like a barley kernel, tiny amount, if it still had some moisture on it, some flesh, a little bit of flesh moisture on it, that is enough to be tamemet, to be the highest level of tum'ah, which is the tum'ah of a dead body. And anyone who walks over it, right, even if it's under the ground, if there isn't a space over it, if it's under the ground and just soil is covering it, the tum'ah still continues and perforates all the way up to heaven, all the way up to the sky, and everyone who would walk over it becomes tamemet. And Kohanim especially had to be extra careful about this, because they had to be careful not to become tameh, because they had special laws that they had to eat certain foods in purity, and without getting too complicated, they had to keep themselves as pure as possible. And therefore the Chachamim said, as a law, we're not going to allow a Kohen to walk through such a land, such an area that was plowed, and maybe there's a piece of a bone with some moisture over a dead body somewhere there. They did not allow Kohen to walk there. And the Tosafot says maybe that's the law, since it's a Derabanan law, it's a fence just as a protection, because we don't know, it's a doubt. Maybe that type of law they allowed him to walk through. They allowed Kohanim to walk through to attend Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's funeral, which we do find a precedent for in Masechet Berachot. It speaks about it very famously over there, where the Chachamim allowed Kohanim to walk through Beta Pras as long as they blow around them, blow the soil around them to make sure they avoid that possible bone. If they're on the way to do a mitzvah, such as greeting a king, which is considered a mitzvah. That's what it says in Berachot over there. But this would also be a mitzvah, right? To attend the funeral and bury such a huge Talmid Chacham, also it's a huge mitzvah, and therefore maybe that's what Tosafot is saying, that's what was temporarily, that law was suspended to allow people, Kohanim, to join the proceedings. Good, so that's Tosafot's opinion. It's a little bit technical, but we'll see what Zera Shimshon wants to take from it. About Tum'ah Doraita lo, but the Tosfot says you cannot say that the Tum'ah of Doraita level, which means for sure dead body, not a beta pras, but a for sure dead body in front of you, that was not allowed. That was not suspended. But says the Zera Shimshon, Devrei Rabbeinu Hananel Kohen nimukam imam. He says maybe the first opinion Tosfot said, which was in the name of Rabbeinu Hananel Kohen, who said that even the highest level, meaning even the Tum'ah of for sure dead body was suspended and Kohanim were allowed to attend, even on the Oraita level, maybe that's still correct, says Zera Shimshon. It sounds like a good reasoning behind it, he says. Based on another thing that he brings another Chacham here, the Siftei Kohen, based on what he writes, you can make sense of it. What did he write, the Siftei Kohen? Al Pasuk, your word on the Pasuk that says over there, same in our Parashat, HaNogea b'met l'chol nefesh adam, that if somebody touches the dead body of any man, he becomes tameh. That's what it says in the Torah. On this, the Siftei Kohen writes, the Eikar HaTum'ah shel hamet einah ba'a ela mehamat shemetim al yedei malach hamavet. Says a big secret here. He says, where does the impurity, the Tum'ah, come when a person dies? Where is the source of that impurity? Why does the dead body become so intensely impure? Says the Siftei Kohen, because most people die through the workings of the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. The angel of death comes and takes the soul. That process itself causes a Tum'ah, a huge impurity on the body that remains in this world. Omnam, but, says that the Siftei Kohen, HaTzadikim shenishmatam yotzet b'neshika al pi Adonai וכו' וכאשר יחנו כן יישאו אין בהם שום טומאה כלל ומשום הכי התשפיר בטלה קדושת כהונה לגמרי. It says tzadikim, righteous people, it doesn't work like that. Righteous people such as Moshe and Aharon, as we've seen in this week's Parashat as well, Aharon passes away in this week's Parashat, Miriam as well. They die, when they die, it says al pi Hashem, by the mouth of Hashem, by the word of God they die. What does that mean? It means they die in what we call the death of a kiss, the kiss of death, which is a much more comfortable form of death, if you will. Right? If you could choose what type of death you wanted, you would choose that, the kiss of death. What that means is that the neshama is kissed out by God, and it's not. It doesn't cause any suffering to the soul. Whereas when the angel of death takes the soul suffers a lot, and it feels the pain. It feels a certain spiritual pain. If we were to understand, right, just to explain it a little bit more, when a person wants to kiss something, kissing itself is a very interesting function that needs the proper analysis, because it's quite unusual. No other animal kisses. No other creation kisses. Kissing is a very human thing, and it's a very spiritual thing. Rabbi Tatz famously says, if you were an alien who came, who has no idea anything about human existence or life, and you came to visit Earth, and you see these organisms, human beings, kissing each other, you would think, what a disgusting and unhygienic practice. What are they even doing? You know how dirty it is? What's the point of this? How does this help their survival at all? Right? What's the evolutionary benefit of this, scientists would say, right? So really it's a spiritual thing. Kissing, when someone wants to kiss something, what he has to do is he has to form his lips in such a way that sucks, that creates a suction, right? And the suction creates the sound, it creates the pocket of air that pulls out towards the lips. And the representation of a kiss is that it's a very affectionate thing, and it's a very emotional thing. And when you kiss something, whether it be your children, your spouse, your parents, a chacham's hand, the Sefer Torah, when you're kissing things, you're only kissing things that you have great affection for, that you have great respect and honor and love for. And not only that, love itself, to have affection and love for anything else beyond a person, it stems from one thing and one thing only. It stems from the love of the self. Which means you can only understand and appreciate love for other things because you inherently are born with the idea that you love yourself, or with the feeling, with the natural feeling that a person loves himself, right? Which is good. You should love yourself to an extent, which means if you hate yourself, you have no choice, you have no chance. You have to love yourself and have a certain self-worth and value to know how much potential and how much responsibility is upon you to be a servant of God and spirit throughout the world. But the point is that a human being is created with a natural love of the self, right? That's why the Torah tells itself. The Torah itself says, you can derive from a verse in the Torah, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." Love your fellow like you love yourself, which means the like you love yourself is already an assumed premise. The Torah assumes you love yourself. I know you love yourself. Everyone loves themselves, right? "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." Just as you love yourself, you should love your others. Right, that's the test. That's the hard part. That's what you have to work on. Not everyone has that naturally. Not everyone can do that to love someone else like they love themselves. That's where the work is, right? Anytime there's a mitzvah, that means there's a resistance against the mitzvah. Anytime there's a commandment from God, there's a resistance. The Yetzer Hara is trying to resist and trying to stop you from doing the mitzvah. Right? That's why God commands you, no, beat the Yetzer Hara, overcome him, and do the mitzvah. So He tells you to love others like you love yourself. Loving others is the hard part. Loving yourself is the assumed premise. It's natural. It's inherent. Can't escape it, right? If you're a normally functioning human being. So, where am I going with this? So, if you love yourself, the love of others is only based on first loving the self, right? First, a child is selfish. When a child is born, he doesn't think about how can I help my mother, how can I help my father, no, he's just thinking about what can I get for myself? Where's my milk? Where's my bathroom? Where's my me? Where's my sleep? Right? It's all selfish thing. That's where everything starts. That's how everybody starts. You start with loving yourself. As you mature, you realize that there are others out there that do amazing things for me that I really love as well. Because without them, I wouldn't be here, right? Parents, spouse, children, God, of course, etc. Rabbis. So the point is that you can only love others because you first love yourself, and then how do you show that love to those others? You kiss them. Kissing, like we said, requires a suction to the self, which means you're sucking them in. You're sucking in their essence. When you kiss someone else, or the Torah, whatever you're kissing, you're showing your affection because you suck it in, that you want it to be part of you. You want it to be in you, ingrained with you, one with you. Why? Because you love you. And you're showing that I love this too because I want it to be me, because I can't escape the love of myself. I automatically love me. And once I suck this other thing by kissing it into me, I'm showing that I really love it too, and I want it to be I want it all to be one big love, basically. It's hard to explain, but that's the point. That's the point. You want to be one with that thing. You want the thing to enter you, you want it to enter your room of your self-love. And you want to share that love with it as one unit. That's what kissing is. How did we get here? Good. Kiss of death. Kiss of death. That's what we got here. So when the tzaddikim die, they die with the kiss of death, which means Hashem kisses them, as it were, and kisses their soul out. And says and shows to that soul, you were so great, you're such a holy person, you followed my word, that you have become a part of me. You deserve to be in my room of love, of my room of self-love, right? And God sucks out that soul very peacefully and gently, and that soul becomes a part of God. More so, right? Everything's a part of God, but that soul feels like it's a part of God. And that's the ultimate reward. Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, they all died like this. To the kiss of death. And the point is, says the Siftei Kohen, that when a tzaddik dies with the kiss of death, there cannot be any tum'ah that remains in the body. That dead body cannot be tameh. That's how he explains. And since that's the case, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who was a huge tzaddik, like we said, he was a huge monumental figure. Without him, we have no Torah today. Without him, I'm not speaking to you on this camera today. He for sure died through the kiss of death. You can't say he died through suffering. And if he died through the kiss of death, that means There cannot be any tum'ah there. And if that's the case, then for sure, even Kohanim can come and bury him because there's no tum'ah to be had from him. Because he's so holy. So maybe the opinion of Rabbeinu Chanan HaKohen, which the Tosafot first brought but later disagreed with, maybe that opinion is correct based on this. Deep answer here. I don't know if I'm going to have time to finish this, but I hope I do. So says the Zera Shimshon further, Aval, but kad me'aynin beh shapir, when we look at this very well, I ifshar lomarken, we can't really say this. He says, no, we can't say that all the Kohanim were allowed to come and bury his body, that he was so holy that, because what does that mean? Every holy person who dies in the world, Kohanim can go bury him then. That's not the law. It's not the law. Zera Shimshon is going to explain. Where's the proof? How do we know we can't say this? He brings the proof from Yosef HaTzadik himself. Yosef, the son of Yaakov. I don't need to explain to you the level of his righteousness. As we know, the Gemara tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu himself took upon himself to take Yosef's bones out of Egypt and carry it to Eretz Israel. Masechet Sotah, Daf Tet Amud Bet explains all the details over there. Look over there. We learn from Moshe, what do we learn? We learn the fact that someone who is tameh, that he himself is tameh because he carried a dead body or touched a dead body, and the dead body itself was allowed to be present in the Levite camp. What does it mean, Levite camp? As the Bnei Israel were traveling through the desert, they had a very special formation that they had to conform to and follow as a camp, as a group of people. And it was very specifically formed. The Torah explains details in Parashat Bamidbar how it was. The very center was the Mishkan. Right around the Mishkan were the Leviim, the tribe of Levi were stationed around there. That was the camp of the Levites, right around the Mishkan. Right, different families. The Levi himself is broken up into different branches, different families. And a certain family, right, there's Gershom, Kehat, and Merari, and they had to be on different sides. Right, Moshe and Aaron and Elazar were in the front of it, and the three families were on the sides. Then outside of the Levi camp, there was four sides: here, right, north, west, east, south, and within each one of those sides, there was three tribes stationed there. Per side, right? I'm not going to go through all of them now, but that's how it was. And that was another camp. So it's three camps: the Mishkan camp, Levi camp, and the rest of Bnei Israel camp around. And there was different levels of holiness as you go deeper and deeper into the Israeli camp. And we see from here that since Moshe himself took upon himself to carry and transport Yosef's bones, if that's the case, where did he keep the bones? In the Levi camp. Which means that people who are tameh, meaning who are carrying Yosef's bones, and the dead body itself, Yosef's bones itself, which were carried, it was in the Levite camp because Moshe took the job. And therefore, that means that in general, the law was that you were allowed to be that level of tameh in the Levite camp. Like it says also Masechet Sotah as well, page 20. Now, if you want to assume that dead bodies of righteous people are so holy because they die from the kiss of death and therefore they do not transfer or emit any tum'ah, if you want to say that, how can you say that since we see that the Gemara itself says that, since Moshe carried Yosef's bones, therefore, you can learn that a person who's tameh and the dead body itself can be in the Levite camp. The assumption in that statement is what? What's the assumption in that statement I just said? The assumption is that Yosef, in his dead body form, emitted tum'ah. Otherwise, why do you have to tell me the law that a dead body can, in general, and a person who's tameh from a dead body can be in the Levite camp? That means that they became tameh from touching the dead body. Which dead body? Yosef. Yosef was tzaddik. There you go. Even though he's tzaddik, he still emits tum'ah. And if Yosef, obviously you can't say Yosef was not a tzaddik. He was a huge tzaddik, and nevertheless his body emitted tum'ah, and therefore that must be the rule by the rest of tzaddikim as well, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi also, which is where we started. Right? So you can't make the assumption that a dead body of a righteous person gives off no tumah, and therefore a kohen could do whatever he wants with him. Can't make that assumption, right? He's saying no here. Like we just said. And if you look at the language of Rabbeinu Hananel himself in the Tosafot, his language himself said that a kohen was allowed to become tameh to him, which means not that the body doesn't emit tum'ah, not that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was so holy that his body didn't emit tum'ah. No, it's just that the law for kohanim to become tameh was suspended, which means his language is that a kohen would be allowed to become tameh to him, which again assumes the premise that his body, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's body, did give off tum'ah. So then, basically, he breaks down the argument of the Sifte Kohen. He breaks down the argument of the Sifte Kohen and says, no, the dead bodies of tzaddikim still do emit tum'ah. So another diuk he says over there. וכדי שלא יקשה זה לפירושי הספתי כהן, אז כאלה דהתה אמר רבקה אמר, he says, nevertheless, the reason of the Sifte Kohen, of what he said, is still powerful. He doesn't want to completely disregard him. So the Zera Shimshon is saying that what the Sifte Kohen said, that a dead body who dies through a kiss of death does not become tameh, does not give off tum'ah, it's still a good point. Even though it doesn't fit with the Gemara and for the saying, like he's saying, nevertheless, he doesn't want to disregard it, he wants to defend it somehow, to a certain degree. How does he do it? He says, he says, not only Sifte Kohen, other people as well, the Ramban and Bamidbar also wrote this, that tzaddikim who do not die through the angel of death, they don't give off tum'ah. This is the Ramban, it's the Rishon, it's a huge opinion saying this, the Ramban. And if that's the case, you can't completely disregard what he's saying. Therefore, you have to settle it like this, says Zera Shimshon. This is how you settle the whole topic. He says, that even though in truth, he concedes to the point that in truth, a tzaddik who dies through the kiss of death does not give off tum'ah. He cannot. He doesn't die from the angel of death. He does not give off tum'ah in general, even though that's true, right? Shehare yatzata nishmatam b'nishika im kol ze. Nevertheless, the law of the Torah does not want to distinguish between them. Meaning the Torah still wants to keep a blanket rule that even though there's some small percentage of people, tzaddikim, who do not become tameh, we still want to keep the blanket rule of the laws of tum'ah regarding dead people, regarding anyone who dies, tzaddik or rasha. Same blanket rule, he says. The Torah doesn't want to make distinctions. Doesn't want to say this yes, this no. Why? Because we don't want to start getting rankings involved over here. We don't want to make differences and distinguishments between one tzaddik and another tzaddik. What does that mean? That means if tzaddik A died, and he was such a tzaddik that we know he died from the kiss of death somehow, and we know he doesn't give tum'ah, then another person, a week later, dies, who we thought was a great tzaddik. But in truth, he's tameh, he gives off tum'ah. That means he wasn't really a tzaddik. So that makes him look bad. We don't want that. We don't want to start saying, oh, since he was such a big tzaddik, he didn't give off tum'ah. But this one, we thought it was tzaddik, really is not a tzaddik. And then you start getting into arguments, who's really tzaddik, who's not really tzaddik. It becomes embarrassing and it becomes complicated. Right? And we find a precedent for this concept as well, where the same place, regarding Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. This is a very, very famous story over there about him. I'll just tell you in short. It says over there that when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died, he still would come home on Shabbat. On Erev Shabbat he came, and he spent Shabbat with his home, his family, even after he died. Crazy Gemara, but that's what the Gemara says. And he would come back, and until one day he came, and somebody knocked on the door on Shabbat, and the maidservant, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's maidservant in the house, said, "Oh, why are you knocking? Don't you so hard? Don't you know Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is here?" It's after he died. After that Shabbat, after that incident, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi stopped coming, says the Gemara. He stopped coming every Shabbat and he stayed in Shammai. Why? The Gemara says, because of this very reason. We don't want to start making rankings within tzaddikim versus tzaddikim. Tzaddik versus tzaddik. In other words, we don't want to say, oh, look, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was a real tzaddik, he comes back on Shabbat. This other tzaddik who just died, he doesn't come back on Shabbat. That means he's not really a big tzaddik. He wasn't as great as we thought. Right? He doesn't want to open that door to that conversation. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi stopped coming. Same thing over here. When one tzaddik dies, we're not going to say that, oh, for him, the laws of Tum'ah are suspended because he didn't die through the angel of death. Because then the same conversation is going to come up. Then you're going to start ranking. This one yes, that one no. This one yes, that one no. We're not going to do that. It's going to be a blanket ruling that all people, no matter what they are, the same laws will apply. Same laws of Tum'ah, Tahara, and Ohel, and all those things that we spoke about, the roof, apply. ומעתה נבוא לבאר הכתוב, זאת התורה אדם על דרך שדרשו רז"ל, זאת תורת העולה. Now we can explain the verse that we started with. Our original question was, why does the verse say in our parasha, זאת התורה אדם קיימות באוהל? This is the law regarding a person who dies in the tent. Why this is the law? Just say this is the person, right? So the answer is because what's the importance of those two words? This is the law. Based on another place, where it says in the Torah, another place in Vayikra, Zot Torah Ta'olah. Similar language. This is the law, again, Zot Torah, it says, of the Olah sacrifice. Torah Ahat Lechol Ha'olim. What it means is, right, there's a drasha, Masechet Zevachim, that the Chachamim explained this verse, Zot Torah Ta'olah. This is the law of the Olah sacrifice. The Olah sacrifice, Olah means to elevate, means to bring up. What it means is, what it means is this, Torah Ahat Lechol Ha'olim, Afilu Pisulim. The same law applies to all things that come up to the altar, the Mizbeach, which means even if something that's not kosher, right? The animal was non-kosher, or a certain part of the procedure of the protocol of the sacrifice went wrong, which made the animal not kosher, right? It's very complicated. There's many different things that can make the animal not kosher. We're not talking about a pig or something like that. I'm talking about a kosher animal that became inappropriate for the sacrifice. Nevertheless, once it was brought up, says the Gemara over there, it doesn't go down. Blanket ruling for all animals that come to the Mizbeach. Once it's brought up, even though there's a psul in it, there's an invalidation in it, it's not brought down. It stays up. Whether good or bad, kosher or not, you keep it up, right? And that blanket ruling concept is learned from the law words, Zot Torah. This is the law, right? Meaning those extra words come to teach you this point. This is the law, which means this is the law no matter what type, no matter if it's kosher, non-kosher, whatever happened to it. Once it's up, you don't bring it down. Same concept can apply here by the dead bodies, right? Zot Torah Ta'olah lefi she'asvara. Right. Same thing applies here. Afkan katav Zot HaTorah Adam ki yamut. This is the law regarding a person who dies, which means right? The word Zot Torah. This is the law. Is coming to teach you that this is the law for everything. It's a blanket ruling, no matter what kind of person, Rasha or Tzaddik. That's the point he wants to teach you. That we're not going to start making distinctions. This tzaddik, yes, that tzaddik, no. All people, Zot HaTorah. This is the law. That's what those words teach you, that this is a blanket ruling for all people. I'm coming. And that is the point that it teaches you here. That nevertheless, he says that in truth, really, a tzaddik, it doesn't give tum'ah. In truth, because he doesn't die by the angel of death. Nevertheless, the same laws are going to apply to him to keep it simple and to not disrespect other tzaddikim. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.